I'm realizing I'm only going to do this.
Cut it out.
10 more
times. Cut it out so I can leave. Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to FANTI, the podcast for all those complex and complicado conversations about the gray areas in our lives. I am Tre'vell Anderson.
I am journalist, author, and, fantastic. Living the life, Jarrett Hill. We appreciate y'all being here for one of our final episodes of the FANTI. Coming up on the show today, we're talking with some...
Oh, wow. You just jumped right on out there with that, huh?
I mean, it is. We're in the last 10. We're in the countdown to the end of the show now. And so throughout the final episodes of the show, we are having back some people that we love on the show that have been really great. And today on the show, we have Jarrett Lucas and Ryan Mitchell, who have both been on shows and episodes that we really have loved over the years. So they'll be joining us a little bit later to talk about our connection to Halloween or our disconnection from Halloween. We'll get into that shortly. But Tre'vell is going to take us for a Pass the Popcorn.
Oh, wow. Okay, this isn't what we discussed, but love that for me.
This is exactly what we discussed.
It's fine. I can roll with it. It's all right, boss man. That's all right. We wanted to talk about, as you all know, like, we are a show. We try to be sort of like of the moment when we can, cover what's in the headlines when we can. And one of the things that we have not yet had taken the opportunity, I should say, to discuss on the pod, on the mic, is the conflict, war going on with, Israel, Hamas in the Gaza Strip, the impact on Palestinians and Israelis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, Jarrett called me 15 minutes before we were, hopping on this here recording today. And we had previously discussed, whether or not we would, wade into these waters. And the very complex and complicado situation, right, that is this conflict and the various ways that it is super emotionally charged for so many. And Jarrett, you said you kind of wanted to talk about why we're not talking about it in particular.
So yeah, like if I'm just like being really transparent and honest with you, the Israel-Palestine stories that we've seen happening over the last couple of weeks, but like really throughout our lives, the conversations around the Middle East have been, for a very long time. And it's something that I don't really get into on mic because it's such a sensitive thing, and coming from so much traditional media over the years and the ways that we talk about it here in the United States tend to be so different than the ways that we talk about it outside of the United States. And there's such nuance in the conversation around the ways that this conflict is showing up right now and has shown up over the years, that it's something that I typically don't want to wade into because I don't want to get myself in trouble or anyone else. And so as we've been talking about this, it feels like something that is big enough that we should address, but it's something that I'm like, I don't always feel like I have a whole lot to add to the conversation around what's happening. And that's why I've been like anxious about how we address it here on the show.
I mean, so I've been covering it on What a Day over on the other podcast since this iteration of the conflict has started or continued or heightened, which was on, I believe it was October 7th when Hamas, staged an attack on Israel that, even though, they supposedly have one of the, most advanced surveillance systems and, all of that, they were not able to detect this attack coming. And in that attack, Hamas killed well over 1,000 people, took reportedly, I believe the latest number is 222 Israelis hostage, and that has intensified this, latest fighting and, airstrikes back and forth between, Israel on the Gaza Strip and Hamas on Israel. And, I think the latest where we are now, they're letting humanitarian convoys through to Gaza to provide resources to the over 2 million folks who are most of, crammed into the southern part of Gaza because Israel, in response to Hamas's attack, told the folks in the northern part of Gaza, which holds about 1 million people, that they had 24 hours to evacuate to the southern part. And they've been, there are reports that they're staging or planning for the staging of a ground invasion, the biggest that they have done as a country in most of their existence. I just fell real deep into the, reporting bag, but just wanted to kind of, say that's the latest iteration of where we are. But there's a broader context and history of this story that I've known and been aware of for the last 15 years or so. I was in Model United Nations when I was in high school. The quote, Palestinian-Israeli conflict, as it was called, was a topic that I had to engage with multiple times, representing the United States in one area, and I want to say Germany or something in another competition. And so I know a lot about the history in the context of this story than perhaps most people might. And so it's important for me to also say in the context of this that, this conflict has been going on for 75 years. I think one of the things that makes it tough to have this conversation is because of all of the emotions that are very much wrapped into it, because of the history of Hamas as an organization being one that came, that was created with the express, intent to harm Jewish folks. And that being, right, cause for the accurate label of anti-Semitism, right, in terms of the ways that they've articulated their desires, but also looking at this situation in terms of, the land, right, that is in question, that the Palestinians say that Israel took from them is, according to the United Nations, disputed land, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's been interesting to witness, just from a journalistic standpoint, how we as U.S. media, as well as international media, are covering this issue, the various language and words that we use to dictate, killings versus deaths, and what that means when we use one to describe one type of victim and another to describe another type of victim, all innocents and civilians in this situation. But it's such a super complex story and issue, and we do pride ourselves on being a place where we can delve into those complexities. But this one is really interesting.
So two things. One, I want to play a clip from the night the president spoke from the Oval Office. When he gave an Oval Office address, Mehdi Hassan, one of the talents over at MSNBC, he was asked about how that speech would be received around the world, or how he thought communities around the world might be me speaking about it. I want to play that clip right now because I think it was a really great example or a great way to be able to discuss it.
There's an international audience here. It's not like people are watching this all over the world, but obviously what the American president says resonates throughout the world, particularly this moment of extremely intense tensions. And I wonder how you thought that speech landed, refracted through that perspective.
It's a great question because we often forget about the rest of the world, even though we're talking about foreign policy. And President Biden came to office reminding everyone that he had a lot of foreign policy experience. He knows world leaders. He has friends around the world. What this crisis is showing us is that a lot of Arab leaders are not happy with him, didn't want to meet with him. And we forget about the global South. We forget that the rest of the world sees what we do, sees our double standards abroad, and doesn't like them. And we kind of turn a blind eye to it. And it's interesting that he decided to do a rather bold speech linking Ukraine and Israel, because a senior G7 diplomat spoke to the Financial Times this week and said, this crisis in Gaza, this war, it means the global South will never listen to us again. They're never going to listen to us about rules-based orders. We're never going to get through to them because they see a double standard. And it's interesting that he did a whole thing about Hamas and Russia and linking them together. It was a slightly axis of evilly, putting them together because they've really got very little in common just when you look at them. Because a lot in the rest of the world would say, okay, if you're going to compare Ukraine and Israel, Biden and a lot of people in America may see Ukraine and Israel as the same. A lot of people around the world see Russia and Israel the same.
Right, yeah.
They see Russia occupying and invading another country and annexing land and dropping bombs on civilians and saying, hey, human shields. And they see Israel doing that in Gaza. Israel is the occupier of the West Bank and Gaza. So that kind of stuff, I know we don't talk about it here in the US on television in Congress. I'm glad you asked the question, because that's what the rest of the world is talking about. That's why America's foreign policy is so unpopular, especially in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, just from my own view on this, which, people can take or leave, I think to Richard Engel's point, they're just very different conflicts along a million different axes. You can look at what the Russians did in Bucha, for instance, the Ukrainian town in which they did go essentially, and this has now been essentially established and independently confirmed, door by door, killing men, women, and children, torturing people. That does look like some of the things that Hamas did in southern Israel. At the same time, the air power, the vastly different air power, the bombing of civilians, I think you're right, throughout the world is being compared in exactly that other direction.
I bring this up because I thought that Mehdi's context of being able to talk about it, how we're seeing this discussed outside and how we're seeing it discussed here domestically, was interesting to me. But I also heard someone recently say, like, this is complex, but it's not complicated. It's complex in that there are so many different factors to consider in the way that we discuss this and who you're talking to and what the lens is. But it's not complicated through the lens of when we're thinking about human life, right? When we think about human beings, when we think about what is right and what is wrong and how we debate that, it becomes a lot less complicated. And so here on FANTI, we haven't had a whole lot of discussion around this conflict. We've obviously had various conversations about our Jewish communities, about Black Jewish communities. We've just talked about that here recently, but I thought it was important that we at least address this moment that's happening in the world and, have a bit of conversation about it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're getting into a lighter conversation with two friends of the show, Ryan Mitchell and Jarrett Lucas, will be joining us to talk about the witchcraft and the hoodoo and the voodoo. You'll understand all that coming up next when we get into Halloween. All right, you can fuel up fast this fall with Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. I can tell you that this is something that I have been doing and really, really loving. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes, so all you have to do is heat and enjoy. Then get back to crushing your goals. Choose from 35 plus weekly flavor-packed, fresh, never frozen meals that promote a healthy lifestyle and meet your meal preferences, all ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Relish the best of autumn with fall flavors, our limited time only hearty comforting meals featuring seasonal veggies like cranberry pecan chicken and apple Dijon pork chops, ready in just 2 minutes. They'll satisfy your fall cravings during the busy season without all the hassle. I am a big fan of Factor. I've been getting Factor delivered every week for months and months and probably over a year now. It's so convenient for me to be able to have 6 meals sitting in the refrigerator that I can pop into the microwave, rip the plastic off, and be able to eat them. I'm always adding a little bit of extra salt, pepper, razzle dazzle, but the food is always really fantastic. And it's also a great way to be able to have things that I wouldn't ordinarily cook. You can head over to factormeals.com/FANTI50 and use code FANTI50 to get 50% off. That's code FANTI50 at factormeals.com/FANTI50 to get 50% off.
So Brooklinen has been a sponsor of this show for a few years now, and you all should take that as proof of our love of them, okay? I particularly like this robe that I got 2 of. That's how much I like it. I got 2 of them. It's so big and so comfy, make you feel like you're in a hotel, even though you at home on your own couch. It's a particular level of comfort that, listen, I know you want to feel it, all right? So y'all need to check out Brooklinen, especially because going into the fall, okay, into the winter, Brooklinen can help your seasonal scaries, all right? The sun is setting earlier, the temperatures are cooling down. You can curb all of that with a cozy Brooklinen setup to settle into each night. Get your robe, get you some nice towels, get you some bed sheets, okay? They got everything that you need for your home, okay? Little furniture pieces, and trust me, everything. It's no trick. Brooklinen's best-selling linens are sure to curb your seasonal scaries this fall. Like I said, visit in-store or online at brooklinen.com. That's BROOKLINEN.com and use code FANTI for $20 off your order of $100 or more. All right? That's BROOKLINEN.com. Use promo code FANTI for $20 off. Hey there, beautiful people. It is spooky season, as the kids say, or gay Christmas. I've heard it described as well. For those who've been with us since the beginning, you know that in our first season, we actually did a two-parter about Halloween, or Hallelujahween, as I was forced to celebrate in church as a kid. And then we did a part 2 of that conversation about Black horror with the legend Tananarive. Do go check out that. But for this week's episode, we wanted to revisit some of those bits with two of our returning champions, two of our faves. They are the executive director of the Stonewall Community Foundation, and we quote them all the time on the show when we talk about the need for, less allies and more race traitors, okay? Shout out to Jarrett Lucas. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And you know them as a cultural commentator, a host all over on the MTVs. You know them online as the Slay God. Okay. Ryan Mitchell, welcome back.
Well, hello. It's been 84 years since I've been back. So I'm
my God.
Happy that
You know
I
what?
am still alive and that I could make this righteous return.
Wow. You know what?
I'm very blessed. I'm blessed and highly favored.
The first time we had Ryan on, we didn't have them on soon enough. Then we had them back on sooner than anybody else had come back on, and they were mad about that. And now it's still stank.
Okay, so I want to first start with you, Jarrett Lucas. What is your thoughts, your feelings about Halloween? Are you celebrating? Are you dressing up? Was that something that was like huge in your life?
No, and no. I will not be partaking in the festivities this year. I will not be dressing up for Halloween. And it was not part of my childhood. And all of these things are deeply connected in that I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. And so Halloween, in terms of all of the holidays, which we didn't dare celebrate, was probably the most egregious offense if you dared to do anything with it. And so my memories of Halloween as a child are tearing through my garden to see if my neighbor's parents left me and my siblings any candy on the sly. Like, that's my relationship with Halloween. And as an adult, it just hasn't spoken to my spirit. But I love it for other people, I think.
I'll say before we go to Ryan, this is why I wanted to have Jarrett on the show, because I feel like I am so I don't care about this holiday. I feel like the gays make it a thing, but I do not care. And I know Jarrett would be with me on this. But go ahead, Ryan.
Well, I think I would also say I have a very similar relationship to Halloween as Jarrett Lucas does, because I grew up Kojic, Pentecostal. And so we celebrated other holidays, but we did not celebrate Hallelujah night. We did not celebrate Halloween. I was not allowed to dress up. The only candy I got, which I really wasn't even supposed to take, was from teachers and school when they would pass out the little Halloween candy. But my mom was like, bring it home, because who knows? The neighbor probably done syringed it and put some mess in it. My mama watched too much TV, but it's possible, that's what the news said. But I didn't really dress up until college, actually, when I was not at home. I was living on campus and I had friends and there was Halloween parties, and I just never really enjoyed it because it's so difficult finding what your costume's going to be. I'm black, but do I want to be somebody white? How do I really figure that out? It's just always been very complicated to me. And I just never really liked it, but I do like Halloween movies, like Halloween Town and Twitches. Give me a good DCOM film.
Come on, DCOM.
And we are in it. I was most definitely watching it on mute and watching Charmed at level 3 on my television until my mama was like, now what you doing watching this? And then I would go back in my closet and read Harry Potter books. Like, I most definitely kind of surrounded myself around it just because I was probably told not to. It was rebellious for me.
Is Jarrett Hill the only person here who doesn't know anything about Charmed?
First of all, wow.
Yeah, he the only one. Because, the power of 3 will set you free.
That's embarrassing if he doesn't.
First of all, the attacks on my character, I don't appreciate.
And he gonna say something about not having cable.
Well, no, I just didn't. I didn't have premium cable, so I wasn't watching Disney Channel original movies and calling them DComs. Okay. Well, it was back when I was a kid, and then like they moved it over to regular. Are we doing this right now? Are we doing this?
Wait, that's premium cable? I just be forgetting that the girls be born in the 70s.
Late 70s, Ryan. Late 70s.
Late.
I'm going to go change and put on my 1985 shirt because I feel attacked. Ryan, I know the first year of your birth was a 2. So like being born in the early 2000s, you can't relate. But I can say for myself, as far as Halloween is concerned, like Halloween is something that I participated in as a kid, but like we also grew up super Christian. So it was like a lot of Harvest Day and all that shit. But then like as an adult, I never cared about it. I always thought like the culture around Halloween was cute or interesting or whatever. But like I always can tell the time of year if I'm walking down the street and I start walking through actual spider webs. So then like that in LA, I feel like that is when I start to see that happening, like between the trees and the sidewalk or whatever, spider webs. And I'm like, oh, it's almost Halloween time. And then you see people start putting up fake ones and it's like spider webs all over the place. So I kind of hate that. But I appreciate like the festive nature of Halloween. I think it's interesting and fun and that kind of thing. But like, I don't need to be involved, right? Like I'm not interested in a costume. I'm not interested in your party. I'm not in any of that shit. It just has never really rang for me. But I always feel like I'm a traitor to my people as a queer person, in that like it's supposed to be such a big deal for us, and especially here in Los Angeles and in West Hollywood. Tre'vell, what about you? What's your background with Halloween?
Well, like I said, Hallelujahween is what we did when I was growing up, and you could dress up, but you could not dress up as anything like demonic or dark-sided. So no ghosts, no skeletons, no vampires, no mummies.
Dark-sided should have been in the book. That's a Southern thing that y'all say about Halloween, about anything that you think has anything. Ryan, I think, would say dark-sided too.
I would, but also, Tre'vell, you're giving Baptist church like that. Y'all got to wear jeans at y'all's church. We did not. So that's different.
Yes. Well, I will say God's Tabernacle of Prayer Church of Christian Fellowship. It was technically non-denominational, but we definitely leaned heavily Baptist. So yeah, we had Hallelujahween, but like you couldn't dress up as any of those things. You could do, like, I remember I had a costume one year. I was Simba, with the whole lion situation going on. Power Rangers. Both the red Power Rangers, they wouldn't let me be the pink one for obvious reasons. And then, but in adulthood, I've never really, I've dressed up for Halloween occasions before, but never like for real. Like in my closet right now, I have a Mrs. Incredible, Elastigirl, whatever, one of them. Type whatchamacallit.
Yeah, but you wear that out in the world.
First of all,
you literally have worn that. You wore that on a speaking engagement that we did.
No, not that. Jarrett is talking about a Ivy Park bodysuit that I wore during a presentation.
No, it is from The Incredibles.
No, it's not. It's red and pink. It was from the Valentine's Day Ivy Park drop. Anyway, but try to play me. But I do have the incredible thingamajiggy, the little leotard thing in my closet. And I wore that to a very private Halloween function a couple years ago. But I've always wanted to dress up for Halloween, but the ideas of the things that I want to do are just too involved and like my level of care never matches the level of involvement that it would require for me, for example, to be. Did y'all watch the Powerpuff Girls back in the day?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so Ryan, you remember him?
Yes. A bad bitch, yes, and that nigga.
Period. Okay, very that. So I wanted to be him. Him is like a lobster figure or whatever looking figure.
And they literally would wear like Lady Gaga, like S type of heels, like in pointed toes, 7-8 inch heel. Like it was iconic.
Non-binary icon. Okay, read about it in We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film, available everywhere. And so I've always wanted to do that, and then I've always wanted to do Chris Rock from the other Chris from The Fifth Element.
Chris Tucker from Fifth Element.
Yes, that's a good one.
Now that you could wear this same Incredibles bodysuit that you wore on stage when we were hosting a thing.
Cut it out.
It's the same look.
Cut it out. Cut it out.
I'm gonna give the producers the photo so they can put it on YouTube so they can see that I'm right. But go on.
You've been looking this up, right, Jarrett? Because I saw you looking to the side, and I was like, Jarrett is getting evidence.
He has.
Absolutely.
He's wrong, to be clear.
Have we met?
He is wrong, to be clear. But I look great in that photo, yes. Please throw it up on screen now.
I also firmly believe that Jarrett is wrong.
My only takeaway from that conversation is that every endeavor Beyonce touches is incredible. That's my takeaway.
Big purr. Ooh, I love that framing.
Because I heard some slander against Ivy Park in there, maybe, and I just wanted to.
There was no Ivy Park reference from me. I just want to be clear, looking deeply into the camera.
But one of the things I like about the costumes during this time period is when you see the I was gonna say the homosexual couples, when they do their couples costumes, you know. But this also applies to the heterosexuals too. You know, they do couples costumes every now and again. But I love this time because, you know, you get to see, you know, the Burris Tuckers as the Addams family, or, you know,
Or Beyonce and Jay-Z as the Proud Family.
Yes.
Remember? That was a pretty iconic one. Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting when I think about Halloween, especially like living in like Los Angeles now, it's a completely different level than any part of like the rest of the country because like, one, I think everything is rested in like, it always comes back to body politics for me in some ways. Like you see people like just be naked and the people who are like, who got the bodies, I guess the muscles or whatever society deems to be like acceptable are the ones who are mostly naked and just like, you know, getting the praises about their costume. And then there's other moments where it's like someone could be wearing that same exact costume and not even really be kind of like seen or heard or, you know, looked at in the same kind of way. And so I think, you know, it's really interesting, like, kind of what comes up for me when I look at Halloween and see kind of what's out, especially because, you know, like I think recently, last year, we went to a circuit party kind of thing. And it was so interesting kind of gearing up to like figure out, well, what is the Halloween costume? And I think even for me, you know, as a plus size girl, I was like, oh my God, what can I wear that I still feel comfortable in, but still feels like, oh, bitch, you're still like gorgeous. You're a bad bitch. Like, show your skin. And I think that was something for me that always comes up like around Halloween because, yeah, it's queer culture, but queer culture literally rests on if you got abs or not. Well, and especially Halloween for me is often more so a cis white queer thing versus like I don't really hear many queer black folks talking about it in that way because maybe it's because of the religious background, but it's always like when I think of WeHo, I'm thinking like they closed down the streets and it used to just be like drunk white folks everywhere.
Which is why I was so out from jump. Like mass crowds of drunk people, I'm out. Like, no, thank you. But Jarrett, I'm curious from your perspective. You work in queerness in a very unique and specific way. I know that has a lot of influence on your social life because of your work. How do you see folks engaging Halloween over the last few years?
It is my social life, to be clear. And like you, I don't like the rowdy holidays, right? Like I love people being in a festive spirit, but I like the mind your own business holidays where you're like traveling, eating dinner with family, as opposed to being in the streets acting a fool. In terms of what I see in community, I think New York is unsurprisingly the other pole of that Los Angeles is, where Halloween is taken very seriously here and definitely registers as a queer high holiday. So everybody knows, or not everybody, but 1969, June, it was a balmy summer eve when the Stonewall Uprising happened. Within 4 years of that, the Greenwich Village Halloween parade started, right? And that was like largely a queer expression. And so there's a lot of history there. I think that the queer piece somewhat gets lost in the rest of what everybody else is doing here, right? Because I think everybody dips into their queer a little bit on Halloween, right? Because in a lot of ways, it's a green light to let go of everything that's oppressively othered, right? And so whether that's sexual repression, gender repression, or just your freak flag and your weirdo badge, right? I feel like Halloween is an invitation to let that stuff fly. And so it can actually be sort of hard to read what's the sort of queer stake in Halloween in a large city like New York, where everybody is sort of queering up the joint.
That just reminded me of, I feel like Halloween, this is to Ryan's point of like the white queerness of it, but also your point, Jarrett, about the invitation to flying your quote unquote freak flag, high, or your weirdo badge or whatever. As you were saying that, the thing that popped in my head is hearing how Halloween in particular has factored into a lot of the gender journeys of trans folks of a certain age, and how Halloween was one of the few days that they felt like they could, show their true self to the world, as they were making their way on their journey. In that history, in that context of the Pride Parade or the Halloween parade there happening, those few years after Stonewall is really interesting in terms of just like that social context. So thanks for sharing that.
Cross-dressing was illegal then, right? Like when Halloween became commercially the institution that it is now, like it's now a $9 billion holiday. Cross-dressing was illegal, and so you're absolutely right. Like folks were like, if this is my one day, I'm gonna take it, right? Like I'm part of the history of Halloween is that I'm so interested in the roots of the actual celebration, what it looks like today. And as a Jehovah's Witness, a JW, you learn those kind of things, right? Like Christmas is not really about this, it's about these things. And similarly with Halloween, I remember learning that people dressed up historically to ward off evil spirits. And so if queer people over the decades have dressed up to ward off the evil spirits of cis heterosexism and trans misogyny, I'm here for it. And I think that still happens for folks.
Period.
So this is actually an interesting element for me in this conversation because each of you, Tre'vell, Jarrett, Ryan, each of you identify as non-binary and use various different pronouns. I know, Ryan, you are he, they. Jarrett, you are...
Who said that?
Oh, did I just out you?
Oh my God, not you telling my tea to the whole world.
I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. But seriously, I'm curious about like Jarrett, as you're talking about like the fact that, cross-dressing wasn't even legal back in those days. I'm curious how Halloween has had an impact or a lens on your own gender journeys specifically, if at all. And I'll let either one of you start.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a really interesting question. I would consider like the first time like I dressed up was actually for an MTV project, and I ended up being like Olivia Rodrigo, and I had a makeup artist, and I had the hair. I was like a cheerleader. It was very sex kitten. It was everything. And let me tell you, the face card does not decline over here. But it was actually so interesting because it was the first time that I feel like I fully was kind of able to sit in this like beautiful femininity that I feel like I've always kind of had about myself, but it never was like fully expressed. And I think in that moment, there was some nervousness about like, oh my God, like this is just so new to me. This is a new perspective or a new experience. because I was never allowed to do something like this. I mean, I think about how I get my nails done, and I used to go to the nail salon with my mom when I was younger, and she would be like, "This is for girls." And so it's really interesting how I look at Halloween and even some of the programming I mentioned earlier. I always kind of have found some interesting like safe space in it, because I am someone who was kind of raised by, you know, culture and TV, and the things I watched online or on TV were the things that I felt most at home and I was able to escape in. And so I do think the first time I dressed up and did all the glam, it really did provide this like outer body experience of being able to be like, wow, what would it be like every day to just feel light and free and present the way and sound the way that I want to. And last year was really about me interrogating what it meant for me to be a thin person, what it meant to be a Black, fat, queer person in certain spaces. And I think I really want to interrogate it. I really wanted to interrogate what my identity was. And I feel like that's what kind of led me to they, them pronouns in non-binary space. But oftentimes I feel like we could be told who we are just because of how we may walk into the room. And I resented that. I was like, well, you can't tell me, but let me figure out why I'm a little uncomfortable with that. Let me actually explore that. And I think now that I'm thinking about it, that first time really dressing up and it being Olivia Rodrigo of all people, it actually really does create that space to open up doors of being like, there is a other side that may actually feel a little bit freer because you have the permission to. And I think that's what this holiday kind of means to some, you know?
Jarrett, Tre'vell, how has Halloween had like kind of an interaction with your gender journeys over the years?
So I think for me, I've long witnessed and felt Halloween to be this casual and cutesy opportunity, like I said, to relieve collective pressure around gender oppression and suppression of self-expression, sexuality, et cetera, et cetera. I've seen that and appreciated it from afar. And I believe that gender identity and expression and my own sort of grappling with those is, or has been, so deep down in my bones that they've also been the last things to be freed. And I'm still, frankly, in that process. And so while I saw that for the world, I actually think that the feeling I received ultimately with that observation was one of resentment, where, and this is less about queer and trans folks embracing the high holiday and more about everybody else. Resenting that all these people would get their fill on October 31 and then make a sport of harassing trans folks, queerdos, weirdos on November 1, right? I think I had a lot of resentment around the freedom, the casual freedom, the easy freedom so many people felt to just throw on whatever things that actually for some of us would represent a closer picture of how we wanted to show up in the world as ourselves. But for them, it was a costume and had carried no real threat. And so I think a lot of my relationship with it has happened in my head, as opposed to finding space and freedom for myself within Halloween to self-express. Dun, 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 dun.
No, that's really thoughtful.
No, it really is. And also, if you ever were to pick a Halloween costume, like you give very Wednesday Addams like energy, which is kind of iconic.
I feel very seen, Ryan. Thank you for that.
No, for sure. I just wanted to make sure someone acknowledged it, and I'm happy it was me.
It's kind of iconic from what we're told.
That feels right. That feels right.
Yeah.
I actually have been growing my hair all these years just so I can do the braid flex.
I know that's right.
Au natural.
Tre'vell, how has Halloween interacted with your gender journey?
I was trying to think of an answer here so that I could sound as, astute as Ryan and Jarrett, but I don't. Bits and pieces of what both of they said resonate with me in this kind of more broad kind of understanding and like a conception of like Halloween's impact on my gender journey, but there hasn't been like a very specific like one-to-one, I think, correlation that I can say. But in the idea that Halloween is often one of the opportunities for folks assigned male at birth to dress up, to get up in drags, as they say. My first time doing that was actually not connected to Halloween at all. It was like for a spirit week in middle school, and it was backwards day, or it was crisscross day. And, all of the other people, you were supposed to wear your like clothing backwards and inside out or whatever. But me and a couple friends, we were like, we're going to switch genders. Okay. And, I write about this in We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film. But, yes, come on, ting. Ting. And so that's what comes to mind for me, just in terms of like this like early experience, quote unquote, cross-dressing, and that being connected to what we kind of see as like this opportunity that Halloween often provides. But it does make me think about the ways in which, there's also like a hoodoo voodoo element of the holiday. That, why you look at me like that, Jarrett Hill?
I was like, I didn't see hoodoo voodoo written in the script, so I was like, well, where is that going?
Yeah, I'm just,
Also, it probably triggered TD Jarrett.
Okay, you know what?
Jared be down at the Potter's house.
Oh my God. My God, today.
Stop the recording. You know what? Stop the recording. Today. We're done here. We've had enough. TD Jarrett, hilarious. That's new. That was coined here by one Ryan Mitchell.
And it's gonna stick.
I don't forgot what I was gonna say, but shout out to the hoodoo voodoo.
No, I would say I really do feel like the only connections, like, really, when it comes to like Halloween, has never really been like costumes for me. It really has been through like what I watched on television. Like, there's something about being able to escape, I think, for queer folks. Like, I mean, the amount of I recently just like started following someone on TikTok who was this like Black queer guy who is like the charmed ratchet guy. That's his name on TikTok. And it really has created this community of just like Black folks who stand charmed, or like queer folks who stand charmed. And I started to really think about like what that really means, even when people are calling for like a Twitches remake and like wanting to have that kind of resurgence of what that really, like, seeing each other and like queer folks kind of finding each other in those spaces. Like, for me, being like 10 in the closet reading a Harry Potter book, even though J.K. Rowling can kiss ass, it did allow for me to escape kind of like what I was being taught on a daily basis of like hating myself.
Period.
And I think like that piece of culture for me, and through these kind of scary stories or through these experiences of watching this fantasy, I just remember myself like escaping and writing out spells or trying to move things with my mind because that world felt better than my own. And so for me, I think like it never was costumes for me. It was always what I was taking in through like watching content or watching, shows and films. Like, nothing too scary because, honey, I don't play with them Exorcists or The Conjuring. But it was still like, it took me out of the spaces of feeling like, oh, wow, I'm never going to see the life that I live now. Like, I couldn't have probably even dreamed this life if it wasn't for the fantasy of living in this delusional state because I wanted to move things with my mind or freeze time.
Oh, that's so real.
Well, I think that's interesting because one of the things that we were interested in kind of touching on here as well was like we've seen a lot more evolution of Black horror, Black suspense and Black thrillers and things like that. And I think it started to help me appreciate about horror or suspense films or thrillers and all those different things, how there can be something to say in it. One of the films that came out earlier this year was The Blackening. And like, I've never been a big horror person. We did the Hallelujahween episode talking about Black horror and Get Out and those things at that time. And like, for me now, it's been interesting to see how Black folks can use the genre to be able to have conversations around race and racism, to have conversations around various different issues and topics. And I thought The Blackening was one of the better, more recent opportunities that we've seen in the ways that we talk about what it is to be Black, right? And how Blackness shows up in the ways that we interrogate what Blackness is and all of those different things that we are often even talking about with things related to our book. And so I thought that Blackening was such an interesting way to have conversation about Blackness per se, if you will. Jarrett, I'm curious for you. You have been a person that one of the things I always joke about with you is like we have such different tastes in our media, and there's very little overlap. There's like Will and Grace and some cooking shows, and like maybe The Kitchen on Food Network.
Right, it's real thin.
It's very thin. Our overlap is very thin, but like I know that your lens on this, on like the ways that media kind of has conversations around topics and around issues is a little bit that perspective is a little bit different than mine. And how do you think about the ways that we're able to kind of use genre and all those things to have conversations?
I'm still sitting with what you were saying, Ryan, because I think that applies to me in a really big way. For anybody, right? Needing, wanting, deserving to escape the realities, the actual horrors of their lives. TV, film, media represents a door you can go through. And for me, the best thing that could be on the other side of that door was fantasy. Still is fantasy, sci-fi, some mix of that. And I think it connects to what you're asking, Jarrett, and that oftentimes, even with the go-to tropes of like, and here's this, sisterhood of witches facing down the big bad, there are really important and powerful messages for people, right? I think about why I love Charmed so much, right? And not that while I was watching it when I was younger, intellectually I was processing all of this, but I think there was a part of me that always understood that magic in the context of that series was the great equalizer, right? Power sort of concentrated on these women and who could change or save or break the world. And I think that when I see stories that tell different possibilities, that display different possibilities of who can hold power and wield power, that I tend to gravitate towards those, especially when it's the underdog or the marginalized or the Black folks or the women in the story or the queer folks. There's something really special and not necessarily subversive about that, but accessible, I think, right? You don't have to be too PSA preachy about it, but at the same time, in this wonderful packaging, entertaining packaging, you can say, hey, I want you to think about some other possibilities for what power can look like. And so sitting there and sort of wishing you could freeze time and move things with your mind and all of that, like totally, I bet there are a lot of queer kids and kids who have been othered who sat there appreciating that same sense of magic and possibility. I certainly was one of them.
Tre'vell, I see you drifting off and thinking into this. What's happening in there?
I'm just, my film history bag is just tapping me on my shoulder with some, information.
I saw the wheels turning.
And I'm like, because I got to go through the Rolodex and actually find the actual listing. That's why I be looking up, to the skies. But, both of you talking about the identification that you have found in horror, thriller, sci-fi, fantasy, those types of genres, it connects to a very real history of representation of the quote-unquote other in the history of film. That other often being Blackness or queerness or, some other sort of quote-unquote difference in that particular regard. And so it's interesting to hear you all articulate, that kind of long-held reality in the course of you all's lived experiences. So, just interesting observation to throw out into the space. But with all this being said, okay, shout out to the Halloween. But as you all know, this is one of our final episodes of the FANTI. You both have joined us on notable, highly referenced, most talked about episodes of the pod. Jarrett Lucas, you were on, I think the one we talk and reference the most is the allyship episode.
It's called Okay Allies, Let's Get Information.
And Ryan Mitchell, your episode that we did about, I believe it was like Black queer dating, if I'm not mistaken.
Black Queer Invisible.
Black Queer Invisible is what it was called. That one was like, highlighted on a Spotify playlist or something like that when it came out. What thoughts, memories, feelings, reflections, do you all have to share with the FANTI fam about your time and your journey with this show?
Ryan, go first because you have an evil smirk on your face as that question is being asked. The smirk is giving like I was nervous.
I just never been so personal. I'm so happy this show's going off the air. If I'm being honest, I feel so honored because I remember when you both were in the beginning stages of this show and when Jarrett was making a deck for this show and seeing how it's come to what it is now. I think it's been such a beautiful moment to experience, but then also to sit in the audience, to be a part of the episode. I mean, like, I remember doing that episode, freaking out that I maybe talked too much about my dating experience and like just felt like I forgot that I was on a mic because y'all are both my friends. But to be honest, like, this show has been such a part of, it's been such a part of my weekly routine that I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to listen to now? The Joe Budden podcast? Like, what the hell?
Wow. What a swing in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I'm like, geez, I guess I got to figure it out. No, I just am I'm so proud of you both. And I think this has been such a beautiful podcast that's challenged my thoughts, that has created new space for me to think about things differently. And I thank y'all for that. I really do. Like, FANTI was really an interesting word that was made up, but actually I think it's a real one now. I would consider it to be a real.
I'll take it. I will take that. For listeners that want to go back and check out past episodes with Ryan, in August of 2022, we did Black Queer Invisible with Ryan Mitchell. And in September of that same year, a month later, to be clear, Ryan was back on our episode talking about daytime talk shows. The episode is called Daytime is the New Black. And Shar Jossell joins us on that conversation. One of my favorite conversations on the show for sure.
Also, I just want to say I bullied them into getting me that.
You did.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know why it's sounding like they wanted me back. I bullied them into putting me on this damn show.
But Jarrett, as we wrap up FANTI and your last appearance here on the show, talk to us about how this has really changed your life.
Ooh, that felt like a leading question going nowhere. You took that risk.
I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. I knew it.
Yeah, you never want to play knock knock with me. You know this. I have similar sentiments as Ryan. Like, I'm holding both pride and gratitude. Like, I know you in particular, Jarrett, but you two together to be creative beasts, right? Generating a lot of brilliant things that some of which get shared with the world and much of which has not yet been shared. And so to see and have been part of this, to be part of it right now in this moment, fills me with pride for y'all. And I'm also holding gratitude for being invited to be part of it, right? Like, one voice in this chorus of voices of really bomb ass people that y'all have pulled together to weigh in on all kinds of topics, right? Like, y'all have brought, I would say, two things, not just, and this is the first thing, not just a sort of practice around talking about complex issues or complicated issues, but also range within that, right? I think sometimes when we think about what's complex, it's easy to go to like the political or the, like the sociological, when in fact, we're surrounded by complexity all the time. And this show has sort of broken open that conversation for so many people in so many dimensions of our lives. And so pride and gratitude is what I feel when I think about y'all and this show and me being part of it.
Aww. If you all want to go back and check out episodes featuring Jarrett Lucas, in July of 2021, we did an episode called Colorism, White Supremacy, Stank Ass Grandchild. And in July of 2020, we did an episode. I forgot we called it that.
Me too.
That was July of 2021. In July of 2020, we have an episode with Jarrett Lucas called Okay Allies, Now Let's Get Information. And I feel like we have referenced that episode hundreds of times, it feels like, since doing it, having conversations about why the idea of allyship is a bit askew, and why we should probably use different language. So Ryan Mitchell, Jarrett Lucas, thank you all for your iconic appearances here on FANTI over the years. We really appreciate y'all's love and knowledge and lived experience being shared with our audience. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Oh, you are so welcome. Just tell me when the next book is coming out so I can give y'all my money.
Absolutely. We will be doing that as well. We want to hear from y'all. Hit us up on social media using the hashtag FantiFam. We're on Twitter, X, Instagram, the TikTok, the YouTube, all at Fanti Podcast. Coming up, why y'all hate us so much, or maybe love us, from some of your feedback and our dishonorable mentions. We're going to be right back.
People say not to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree.
Which is why here on Just the Zoo of Us, we judge them by so much more.
We rate animals out of 10 in the categories of effectiveness, ingenuity, and aesthetics, taking into consideration each animal's true strengths, like a pigeon's ability to tell a Monet from a Picasso, or a polar bear's ability to play basketball.
Guest experts like biologists, ecologists, and more join us to share their unique insight into the animal's world.
Listen with friends and family of all ages on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get podcasts.
It's the final week of Co-Optober. I'm Richard Roby, producer, and I'm here with
KT Wigman, operations specialist. To cap off National Co-op Month, we're sharing how worker-owned co-ops can benefit their communities. Read about it in our newsletter or on social media at MaxFunHQ.
We're also trying to do our part. We're volunteering at our local food bank this week, and we encourage you to volunteer in your area too.
On Friday, we're announcing the donation that you helped raise in the Post-Max Fund Drive sticker sale, going to 5 food banks across the U.S.
And we want to make sure that you know this is your last chance to get our limited edition Launch Crew merch.
Grab a pin, hat, shirt, or hoodie before they disappear at the end of the month.
Details on merch, resources for volunteering, and all things Co-Optober can be found at MaximumFun.org/Co-Optober.
That's COOPTOBER. Thank you so much for your support and a great Co-Optober.
Welcome back, beautiful people. Now we are going to get into our listener feedback segment. And as we all told you, we want to hear from you, your thoughts, your feelings about, FANTI coming to a close. You can do that by going to speakpipe.com/FANTI. And we have one of those voice memos to listen to today.
Hi, Jarrett and Tre'vell. My name's Danielle, and I absolutely have loved the show from the very beginning, especially the way that you two exemplify Black joy, leaning into your entire life, all of your experiences, good, bad, and everything in between, living so beautifully and authentically and out loud is the best thing that I could ask for as a Black American woman. I love seeing us thrive. I especially love seeing my LGBTQ siblings thrive. And I think we've all been on a wild journey together these past 4 years. And I'm so happy that we did it side by side.
Thank you so much for that, Danielle. Doing the last 4 years together with the FANTI fam has definitely been a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Danielle said at the end, I think we've all been on a wild journey together these past 4 years. I was just saying to someone the other day, like, I still have moments where I realized Donald Trump was president, and like he was president every day, and like we got through that. And having started this in the weeks before the pandemic shut us into the house, it's been quite a journey. So Danielle, thank you so much for your note. Okay. If y'all want to send us a note, a voice note, you can do that at speakpipe.com/FANTI, and we will be including them up in upcoming episodes and then compiling a number of them to put together at the end of the show. So now it is time for our dishonorable mentions. These are the stories or people that caught our attention, either for their good or for their stupid. They deserve to call out. Tre'vell, what you got?
You go first.
I want to give a shout out to Zainab Johnson. She is a stand-up comic who used to be like on my old show that I used to do, Back to Reality, a number of years ago. She is incredibly funny. She is a Muslim woman, and she has a new special on Prime Video called Hijabs Off. It just premiered on Tuesday, October 24th. I'm watching it tonight as we are recording. I'm very excited to check it out, and so want to shout her out. And that's it for me.
Lovely. And now it's time for Black History is Happening Every Day. Now, people will notice that I did not have any honorable mentions, and I made you go first. And that is because for our Black History is Happening Every Day today, this was not my decision or my choice. This was a producer call.
Uh-oh.
The person that we are recognizing today is me.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Because
you want me to do it?
Because this is a Palmyra decision. Okay. Support Black creators, support Black producers. And so they wanted to highlight me because I am in this year's Out 100.
Ew.
I have been listed in the Disruptors category alongside Kid Fury and Crystal from The Read, who are celebrating their 10-year anniversary this year. I'm also in that category with Jimbo, I believe, if I remember correctly, who's a drag queen that many of you might be familiar with if you watch Drag Race. And a number of other folks who are apparently disrupting whatever segments of the world that they find themselves in. So shout out to me. Now, I am not the first person to go from being an employee of Out Magazine and someone who crafted and helped curate the Out 100 to now being on it. I'm not the first, but I am the most fabulous. So shout out to me.
I'm not the first, but I may be one of the few. So shout out to you being celebrated on the Out 100 list this year. Much deserved. Very excited to see that for you. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Before we go, we want to remind you can check out our brand new book, Historically Black Phrases, From Who All Gonna Be There to I Ain't One of Your Little Friends, is available right now.
I don't know. I don't think you can call it brand new anymore.
It is brand new. It's only been out a month. It's brand new for a year for me. I don't know what you thought. It is a brand new book.
I don't know what you thought.
I don't know what you thought. Okay. Historically Black Phrases from I Ain't One of Your Little Friends. So Who All Gonna Be There is available wherever you get your good books or your bad books, as well as We See Each Other, both books that have been mentioned on today's show. We See Each Other, A Black Trans Journey Through TV and Film. Tre'vell's book is available wherever you get your what?
I was just going to add to that plug. I do have a couple speaking engagements coming up around We See Each Other. Go to my social media, child, because I can't remember off the top of my head. But I think next weekend I'm doing something in the outside of the Philadelphia area at Bryn Mawr College, and then in a few weeks I'll be back in DC at American University. I believe both events are open to the public. But check out my social medias, please, and thank you.
You're in a new documentary, correct?
Oh, and yes, I was just in DC this past weekend for the premiere of the very first documentary that the Blacksonian, also known as the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, that they have done. It's the first feature-length documentary that they've done. It's called God Talk, and it is about Black millennial faith practices and unapologetically centers queer people, trans people, agnostic, atheist people, non-Christian faith people, in an articulation of what our relationships are to faith in these days and in these moments. You can screen it. They're screening it at the museum this week. And the week that you all are listening to this, in this coming week, and then they'll be traveling it across the country. But you can check that out over on the Smithsonian, or the Blacksonian, as I like to call it, as well.
That said, we appreciate y'all tuning in to us. If you're watching us on the YouTubes and you're like, oh my God, I love this show, why are there only a handful of episodes? You're wrong. We are almost at about 200 episodes. You can go to FANTIpodcast.com to check out our... You're wrong. Okay, you're wrong. FANTIpodcast.com will give you access to all 4 seasons of our fantastic show. If you have a comment or a suggestion about this week's show, there's various different ways that you can get in contact with us. Hit us up at FANTI Podcast on the Instagram, on the Twitter, the X, the TikTok, the YouTube, whatever the platform is. You can hit us up using the hashtag FANTIFam, or you can send us an email to fanti@maximumfun.org.
And yes, just because we are ending does not mean you cannot show your love and your support for these Black queer creators, all right? And the way that you can do that for these last, 9 episodes from here on out is by going to MaximumFun.org/join to become a financially contributing member of the Fanti fam. It's also good because then you will be supporting Maximum Fun as a network, which is a worker-owned network, right? And so you should support independent podcast creation, all right? Period. Our music is brought to you every week by Corice, the Grammy Award-winning Corice, COR.ECE, wherever you get wonderful and amazing music. Our graphics are by Ashley Wynn and the folks over at Moonhouse Creative. Our editor is Anne-Marie Huber, and our producer is Palmira Muniz.
Our senior producer is Laura Swisher. This is a production of Maximum Fun.